A few days ago, he was the president of the Ukraine. Now an arrest warrant has been issued for Viktor Yanukovych after the parliament of the Ukraine voted him out and replaced him, of all things, with an evangelical Christian.
And in Kiev Sunday, protesters did not celebrate victory. Instead, they mourned the victims. George Thomas brings us the story from Kiev.
Many of you today probably feel the same as I do. There are a lot of tears in our hearts.
At one of Kiev's largest evangelical churches, Pastor Anatoly Kaluzhny tries to comfort a grieving congregation.
To be honest, I am not euphoric. My heart is aching because our nation has paid a big price in blood.
Ukrainians have been mourning the more than 100 people killed in clashes between riot police and protesters. And that sadness settles over a country facing dramatic political changes. After 3 months of protests, anti-government demonstrators are now in power. On Saturday, Ukraine's parliament stunned the nation by voting overwhelmingly to impeach President Viktor Yanukovych, who then fled the capital city. Hours later, members of parliament picked Alexander Turchinov, a prominent evangelical Christian, as interim president until new elections in May.
Christians were praying on Independence Square. We were praying in our churches. People around the world were praying for us, and God did a miracle. Ukraine is a new country.
And to give you a sense of just how dramatic the changes have been, a few days ago, this entire street was completely filled by the so-called Ukrainian Berkut, the police. Today, you have dozens of men. You can take a look all the way down. These are ordinary folks who have taken up position in front of the parliament. What happens next is very uncertain. As lawmakers scramble to put together a coalition government, skepticism abounds. That includes former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko, free after spending the last 30 months in prison.
We need to totally change the government. We need a whole new set of leaders. We don't need the rich oligarchs back in power. They need to go.
Ukraine's neighbor, Russia, closely watches the changes. It has huge economic ties here, and President Vladimir Putin has publicly talked about bringing Ukraine back into its political orbit. The protesters instead want closer ties with Europe. On Sunday, America warned Russia not to even think about sending troops into Ukraine. Back at Pastor Kaluzhny's church, a plea for reconciliation after months of turmoil.
We need to unite because the society is divided east and west, north and south. We need to come together and make very important decisions in the days ahead.
I know some of you say, well, what's with Ukraine? Like, who cares? I want to show you a map just to give you a sense of the strategic location. You see, there's Russia, and right there's that huge country of Ukraine. It's a gigantic country, but look, it borders on Belarus, it borders on Poland, it borders on Slovakia, borders on Hungary, borders on Romania. It is a strategic port on the Black Sea, and it is probably one of the most fertile areas of agriculture in the whole world. So when Stalin came in with his collectivization, he starved out the Ukrainians and took away their food. But nevertheless, they want freedom. And it's just amazing. The Russians want it because, you see, Putin wants to reestablish the former Soviet Union. He wants greater Russia. He wants hegemony. And right in the middle of the triumph of that Winter Olympics, they pull this thing away from him. I mean, it's one of those ironies of history. Now, George Thomas is over in Kiev, the capital of the Ukraine. And, George, tell us about that interim president. That comes as quite a shock.
Yeah, it was stunning. He was, in essence, he's 50 years old. His name is Alexander Turchinov, and he has a long political career, Pat. He's a close ally of the former opposition leader, Yulia Tymoshenko, who was just released a few days ago after spending 30 months in prison. But clearly, as I've spent time on Maidan, on Independence Square, people are talking about Turchinov because he was there. He was there from the beginning, ever since November, when the riots began, when the demonstrations began, he was there calling for Yanukovych to step down. So he has emerged clearly as a central figure in all of the upheaval that's taking place today in Ukraine.
Well, George, they're going to have elections very soon. Is it Timoshenko? Right. Is she the front runner, or is this gentleman going to be running and he might be the next full-time president?
Yeah, excellent question, Pat. You know, there's ambivalence toward Yulia because, you know, people remember she represents, Pat, so much of the old guard, and many of the folks, the majority of the folks I have spoken to say, listen, we want young people. We need fresh blood. We need folks who are not tied to the oligarchs, these rich families that they accuse of controlling the wealth of this country. And they say, listen, we're fed up. We want something new. We want righteous leaders. The Christians are praying for righteous leaders, men and women who will bring that moral, biblical foundation to the country. That doesn't mean, Pat, that she doesn't have a huge following. She surely does. But on the streets, people are just fed up, Pat. They want new blood. They want new faces, new leadership.
All right, there's talk about a split. The people on the east, the ones that border Russia, they kind of like the Russians, and the ones on the west want to tie in with the EU. Now, is there going to be some kind of a split, do you think, or the people you talk to say we've got to keep the country together?
No, it's mixed, Pat. Obviously, you know, the big focus right now in the last 24 to 48 hours has been the Crimea region, as you very well pointed out that map. Very strategic, very important to give our viewers a picture of why this country is so strategic. Russia wants, there were protests today in Crimea in an area called Sevastopol, which borders the Black Sea. The Russians have a huge naval presence, and those in that area, in the southern part of Ukraine, definitely want to side with Russia. They want the split, but it is evenly divided. The eastern part is predominantly pro-Russian, the western part predominantly pro-European, and so there is this tug of war. But let me be very clear. As I've spent time here, I was just here 2 weeks ago, got back over this weekend because of the uproar. This is also about corruption, Pat. Let me just tell you, over and over and over again, people are saying, enough. We are tired of paying bribes. We just want to live a life where we don't have to deal with all of this corruption.
Well, I understand the country's bankrupt now. Fortunately, the IMF has come together, and the European Union and the United States have said, okay, here's a rescue package. Putin has put up $15 billion, and it looks like it'll take more than that, but nevertheless, the Western powers are saying, we're going to bail you out. Is that coming pretty fast from what you hear, or do you hear anything about it?
Yeah, you know, obviously that's a huge concern, as you well pointed out. This is, in essence, a bankrupt country, and Russia came to the table very quickly. The accusation that's been made against the West, especially the European Union, is like, hey, guys, what have you been waiting for? We've been bankrupt all this time. How come you didn't bring some money to the table like the Russians did? And so Putin, last November, thought, boy, I've got the winner. I've got the prize, Ukraine. They're going to accept $15 billion and subsidies in gas. And then suddenly, thousands of people hit the streets of Kiev and say, wait a minute, Vladimir Putin, we don't like that solution. So clearly people are, you know, the Brits have coughed up some money to help the country, but clearly going forward, I think there's a wait and see approach. Let's see who is going to make up this coalition, what's going to happen in the next few days. And then obviously the big question, Russia, what do they do? Listen, this is clearly a huge blow for Kremlin and Vladimir Putin, because he was hoping to extend his territory. You know, he once called Ukraine the little Russia, and he in essence was very, he talked about a few years ago how the fall of communism was the biggest geopolitical catastrophe of the century. So this is a big, huge blow for Vladimir Putin.
George, thank you very much. George Thomas reporting from Kiev in the Ukraine. And it's important to all of us, but it looks like amazing that an evangelical Christian has been put in, at least temporarily, as president of that country. He might well win an election. It's extraordinary, but this is a major, major defeat for Putin right now. And the United States has got to hang tough and say, look, Vladimir, you keep your hand off. And apparently they've sent that word to him, don't you dare send in troops. Well, while the world has been focused on the crisis in Ukraine, another national rebellion with major implications is still raging in Venezuela. Our Dale Hurd is down in Caracas with this story.
It's been 13 straight days of violent clashes in Venezuela. On one side, pro-democracy forces, many of them students and the middle class. And on the other side, police and pro-government groups, Chavistas as they're called, followers of the party of anti-American President Hugo Chavez, who died of cancer last year. Why are so many Venezuelans fed up? A disastrous economy with soaring inflation and shortages of basic goods, a terrible crime wave, and political repression under Chavez's successor, Nicolas Maduro. Venezuelans abroad are protesting against the government too, in Florida and California, and in Panama, where CBN's Chuck Holton talked to some of them.
Here in Panama City, Panama, there are tens of thousands of Venezuelan expatriates, many of whom are here today, joining in solidarity with their countrymen back in Venezuela.
Beyond all of the basic needs that we have in Venezuela, we just don't want communism in Venezuela. This is a matter of people trying to feed their kids, people being afraid of go out to the streets and being shot.
I have my mother and brothers in Venezuela. They're having a very bad time over there. They're really horrified of what's happening over there.
In Caracas, opposition leader Enrique Capriles told President Maduro, "I will not accept, nor will anyone here, that Venezuelans who think differently are fascists. Take those words and put them you-know-where." There has been growing concern over violent pro-government attacks on demonstrators. Leopoldo Lopez, the opposition politician accused by the government of instigating the demonstrations, is in jail. Another critic of the Maduro government, retired Army General Angel Vivas, has emerged as a darling of the opposition after engaging in an armed standoff with persons he described as Cuban and Venezuelan henchmen who had come for him. Some feel the tipping point in Venezuela will be when enough Chavistas lose faith in the government and join the opposition. And although it's a very long shot, what happened in Ukraine just might happen in Venezuela. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
I want to correct, Chuck Holton is in Caracas. Dale is here at the CBN News headquarters, but we've got the situation covered. Now, here's the deal. Chavez did everything he could to cultivate the Cuban Revolution, and he has been sending 100,000 barrels of oil to Cuba. And I think it may be, I don't know if it's there every day or whatever, but it's an enormous amount of oil. And if that's cut off, it will strangle the Cuban economy. So the Cubans want to send troops in. They want to do everything they can to uphold Maduro. But he is a left-wing thug. And as I warned on this program a couple of years ago and was pilloried across the nation for suggesting we ought to take out Chavez, my words have come true. Chavez, of course, died of cancer, but nevertheless, we should have heard his demise a little bit along. It wouldn't have been the problem we've got now. But this country is falling apart. It's right on the edge of the Caribbean. It's has been a breeding ground for Iranian revolutionaries, the possibility of missiles coming at the United States. I mean, it's a horrible situation. And they, like the Ukraine, are now bankrupt. They are loaded with oil. They have potloads of oil in their various resources. It's heavy crude, but they've got it. And they have been using it as a weapon, but despite all that wealth, they have squandered every penny of it because that's the way communism works. So it's something to pray about. And these people, once again, they want freedom. And across the world, around the world, people are saying we've had enough of these corrupt regimes. We want freedom. And so our hats are off to the revolutionaries in the Ukraine and also those in Venezuela. Here's Wendy.
The people are speaking, no doubt about it.
You've just come back from New York. You were on with my buddy Sean Hannity.
Yeah, Sean says hello.
Yeah, well, he's a good friend.
Such a great guy. Yeah, I was up there, Pat. I appeared on a special edition of Hannity last Friday night. Sean interviewed Mark Burnett and Roma Downey about their new movie called Son of God, which comes out this week. And I was part of a panel of experts who had seen the film.
Wendy, hi.
Hi. I'd just like to thank Mark and Roma for the quality, the filmmaking. It's so gorgeous. It's so beautiful. But just beyond that, and more importantly,
just that you can feel the power of God here in the studio from the clips that we've been able to see. So it's not only quality filmmaking, which is important because, as we know, Christian films have kind of lacked that a little bit in the past years. Not to say anything bad about them. For instance, Fireproof, starring Kirk Cameron, was #4 at the box office a few years ago, and Hollywood was like, whoa, what just happened? So Hollywood has seen the light, no pun intended, but now we have the quality and the power of God. I just want to say thank you. It's magnificent.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. And who else was on the panel? I sat next to Stephen Mansfeld, who we just had on the show, and Ralph Reed was there. He says hello. And you know, I have to say, Mark and Roma Downey are such humble. They're so humble. I mean, they've done something incredible in Hollywood, and they need our prayers.
Wendy, we had an advanced showing of The Passion of the Christ, and I saw it, and it was just so brutal. And I told the producer, I said, listen, you've just got to tone down some of those things. You've got the poor man dead before he gets to the cross. They didn't follow my advice, needless to say, and it was a box office smash. They grossed about $600 million, which is huge, but it didn't have the quality that this movie does. This movie is fabulous, and it's so well done.
And it's been 10 years since The Passion of the Christ, so I think it was time. I think this was a good timing.
Absolutely. Well, Mark Burnett is I mean, he's just one success after the other, and of course, Touched by an Angel was Roma Downey's starring role, and the other two of them, but they're very dedicated evangelicals, and it is a beautiful adventure, and by all means, go to see it. Support it with your churches. I think it's important.
February 28th.
Welcome to Washington for this CBN News Break. Uganda's president has signed a bill that has harsh penalties for homosexuality. He says the bill is necessary because, quote, arrogant and careless Western groups had tried to recruit Ugandan children into homosexuality. The president said he signed the measure because a team of Ugandan scientists found there's no genetic basis for it. And in reference to pressure from other countries not to sign the bill, he said, we Africans never seek to impose our view on others. If only they could let us alone. CBN's 700 Club version in Indonesia, Solusi Life, is reaching more people than ever. More than 64,000 people are tuning in to the show, and over 14,000 are responding to the program by sending in text messages. Solusi Life is broadcast daily in Jakarta and other major Indonesian cities. Several hundred people have prayed for salvation. Well, you can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international.